Hello.
Hey James, how you doing?
What's up? Oh, look, that's my face. That's crazy. Hold on. Hey, everybody.
Hey, how you
Oh,
doing by the
shoot.
way?
Not too bad. It's been a busy week.
Uh, mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw your message. I hope everything's going well over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Oh my God, I'm on Cybertron. You're right. Yeah. How's it going? I saw all those questions. There's a lot of questions, so let's see what we can get through.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, so,
Yeah.
uh,
Let's just wait for a few more minutes so more people can join in.
sure. Yeah,
And yeah, we'll start. We'll start. It is okay if we can recording this event, this
of
meeting.
course. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah, fellow Transformer fan. Everyone excited for Transformer Us Boxing 3?
Nice. So, yeah. My internet might be a little slow. I'm at the hotel right now, so everyone else is in Zoom calls. Like there's a bunch of people working from home, so there's I see like three or four people like working on their stuff.
That's nice. Is most of the job like most is this most of people working in home now, like working remotely, that kind of stuff
Yeah,
in the
yeah. Like
studio?
our show is fully remote. We do get to go in the
Oh,
studio if you want, but yeah, yeah. Everybody, the show has been fully remote since 2020, 2021, something like that.
nice.
Mhm.
Oh, 2020. That's when the COVID hit.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll get into more of it later, but yeah, we started production and or development in 20, it was like summer of 2020 or something like that, and then um, I think production
Um,
started in
Sun,
2021.
hmm. Sunny asked is we're working completely remote on the show, that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
Sunny
de-
asked on the chat. Okay.
yeah, definitely, yeah, super weird. Because yeah, I started my career on just in studio, and there's magic when people are around each other. It's just easier. You get to talk to each other, and you don't have to message each other just to hop on a call or something. You can just hop over to someone's desk, like, hey, could you look at this thing I'm working on? Because it's blowing my mind right now. Stuff like that. Just
Hmm.
you know, um, obviously, like if we were all hanging out in a room together, it'd be easier to talk to everybody, see everyone's faces, and we get to connect more. So you miss that element when you're working remote a little bit. So we do our best to each team tries to create that environment. So like we'll go do lunches together. We'll come in studio if we can. Um, just hang out regularly, just so you can establish that relationship. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like I was like during the COVID, I was basically online student in this art school for whole 3 year. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I moved on to campus, I felt and start drawing with bunch of my friend and professor and stuff. I really feel productive and I feel more engagement when studying in person on campus, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You get to yeah, you just get to experience more. We're missing this touch factor. I see Emily's question. Are they trying to get people back in office? Yeah, absolutely. They were. I think Nickelodeon's just in a little slow, but like the big mouse, like Disney and like Warner Brothers, they have people in house all the time. So it's coming back, but I think it's also going to. It's just different now. Like hybrid is going to be normal. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay. It's already been 5 minutes. I think we're good to start the meeting and I'm going to record the meeting
Yeah.
in three,
Recording in
two, one.
progress.
Okay. Hey guys, thank you guys so much for joining us today for this special Q&A session. We're glad to have Jermaine Jose here, or for John, since Jose is his dad. He's a co-director of Transformer Earthspark, and he also worked on other animation movies and shows as a visual development and background artist such as Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, the movie, Teen Titans Go, the movie, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle show. again, thank you so much for joining us here, John. I have been reading your letters from your newsletter from and on your Twitter. It inspired me a lot, to be honest. To get started, can you please introduce yourself? We'd like to hear a bit about your journey and what led you to this thought director of Transformer Us spot. And can you tell us about some of the projects you have been working on and what have you been focused on recently in your career?
Sure. Um, yeah, let's start from the beginning. Let's see. I wasn't really like I drew a little bit as a kid, but I wasn't one of those like prodigy kids or anything like that. I didn't make the decision to be an artist until high school. I was lucky enough to get into art school. Lucky enough, I paid to get into art school, and then I was lucky enough to get a internship afterwards at Nickelodeon. That one was more of a connection thing, you know, like that was able to get me through the door. Um, and then let's see, I was a production assistant on Dora the Explorer, and then after that, um, like I was also an intern on Dora the Explorer, and then luckily they wanted to keep me around. Um, and then I was a production assistant for a few months, and I was freelance. I had the opportunity to freelance for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when it came around. It was funny because before I had done the internship, I I saw that Nickelodeon had purchased the rights to Ninja Turtles, and I was like, man, I gotta I gotta do whatever I can to get on that show. Right? Like I'm sure a bunch of you guys grew up on some of your own favorite stuff, and you see an opportunity, you're like, oh my god, if I could get a shot, I hope I could do it. And so, yeah, I just finesse my way into getting to know people. And luckily, one of my intern mates, they were rooming with a one of their classmates that ended up being a painter on Ninja Turtles, and it was his first gig. And he had just started around the same time as me, or as us, rather. And he's actually like one of my best friends now, and he's co-art director with me on Transformers Earth Spark. So yeah, that was our first gig together, TMNT, and then after like 4 or 5 seasons, that ended, and I got the boot, and I was like, oh shoot, what do I do? I only know Ninja Turtles. So that was one of those, um, I don't know, one of those moments where you have to look at your career and like, what do I do next? And luckily, I made some other connections with some friends, and there was a spot in 6 Point Harness, which was a smaller studio, um, doing some indie stuff, and they had a project called Apollo Gauntlet, which was on Adult Swim. And there I learned a little bit about production design or background design, and a little bit about production design from the art director there who brought me over, who then helped me out in getting some other gigs after that over at the WB, and that's where I worked on Batman versus TMNT. So that was TMNT project number 2, and that was a direct-to-TV movie, and I was only there for like I don't know, like a couple weeks, so I only had a handful of backgrounds to do there, but it was really fun. Um, and then Rise of the TMNT, which is on the screen right now. That one, I was brought on to be a background painter for that, and that was my first 2D animated, or not. I guess not first, but it was first full time 2D animated gig, and that was a big shift from CG, CG pipeline stuff, and to making the paintings that will actually be seen on screen. Right. I hadn't done that before, so I wasn't really familiar with that process. So that was a big learning experience. After Rise, we did Rise of the TMNT movie. In between all that stuff, I was freelancing here and there. That's where Teen Titans stuff came in. That's when I did some stuff on Jellystone, Santiago of the Seas. So small things here and there that were at the studio, and just freelancing. And then, yeah, after the Rise movie wrapped, it was on to Transformers Earth Spark, and I've been there ever since, which is wrapping up soon.
Nice.
Yeah. And then
Um,
yeah, so go ahead. Did you have another follow up there?
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah, if you had another question.
Um, yeah, I'm about to ask, when it comes to the plan of like 3D and the 2D animation of the project that you've been working on, like what are your preference, what's your thought, and do you have any like challenging come with it when you work on like 3D
Oh yeah,
3D
yeah,
project?
definitely. So 3D was my first. Going on TMNT 2012, that was my first introduction to a CG pipeline. And then, working on another Turtles project, so Rise, that's the 2D pipeline. There, I feel like you get to do more in a CG pipeline. There's the challenges of working within specifically a 3D space. You don't get to push and stretch. There's as much, like everything feels more like a live action film. You're building these little props and sets and characters in 3D. So the cool thing is you get to be a little bit more complex with the things that you design, but you have to be careful about. You still have to, design in a way that it's interesting to look at, easy to produce, easy to understand and animate, right? So I learned a lot in that show because it felt like a live action space. So we were using a lot of the same terminology, thinking in terms of like camera, cinematography, same things, and then pulling from live action references constantly. Like our producers were huge, obviously huge 80s fans. So you see a bunch of horror um, influences in that series, a lot of influences from comics and stuff. So the big differences that I found were the production deliverables, right? So the type of art that you create on a daily basis is going to be like, we'll do paintings, right? But then for instance, a painting on screen right now, like that's a 2D painting. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
going to be the final thing you see on screen. But on a CG
Mm-hmm.
show, we're mostly painting concept, right? It's going to be translated to something else. So it might not be, um, it all depends on the pipeline and who's running it and how clean it needs to be. But like for us, we try to make it as, um, I guess, render ready. Like the reference has to
Mm-hmm.
be as close to 3D as possible. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges is making sure that you are painting at a high enough fidelity that it can be directly translated to whatever
Mm-hmm.
you need it to be in CG. And then I think the big challenges in 2D is the sheer volume of work that you need to do. You got to paint a lot. Like there's hella paintings.
Oh, okay.
I could be painting like 20, 30, 40 paintings in like a week or two. It all
Wow,
depends
that's a
on
lot.
it's a lot. Yeah, yeah. So it depends on like the complexity of the style, right? So the production design and the schedule, which you're always kind of a slave to, which sucks. But a smart production designer and art director will shift it in a way so that you're able to pull it off. And then it's up to you, especially as a rookie, to gain that experience and just kind of knock it out. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, I'd say CG is a little bit more challenging because you cover a range of things like character sets, props, graphics, effects, color scripts, color design, you name it. Like it's the whole thing. But if you're a background painter, you're you're usually just limited to the backgrounds and maybe some color cards or things here and there. Yeah.
Mm. Gotcha. And what about like in the project in Transformer Earthspark? Is there any
Mhm.
different from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pipeline?
No, not really. It's funny because when we got the gig to do Earthspark, we were like, "Oh man, this is our shot to do what we did on Turtles, but a little bit better. We can do it a little bit faster. We can streamline some things. We could, just try to do the things we wish we could have done with today's technology." And
Mm.
the biggest hurdle that we have was we didn't have what we had back then, which was an in-house CG team. So we did not have in-house modelers or texture artists or animators or comp artists or anything like that, like we had on Turtles. So we had much less control over the final product. So the concept art that we created, we were trying to aim for a more painterly look, especially with the advent of things like Spider-Verse, that was able to break the mold. You didn't have to make everything look like a live action film. You can change things stylistically, right? The problem is if you're working now with an overseas studio, it's still, there's translation involved. You have to work with other people and they might not have the necessary skills to create the look that you want because you didn't hire them, so they have their own set of skills and limitations.
Okay.
So you're working with different people and it's totally fine because like that's kind of how it's going to be. So you aim for something, right? And you'll maybe get like 50 to 75% of the way towards your true vision, right? And you just kind of have to be okay with what comes out. And I think it turned out. It turned out all right. It looked pretty good.
Yeah. On the TV side, it looked good. So yeah. I noticed like I saw like you did like color key and the Gentleman as well. And I'm just curious about those process, like how you design those color palettes for the giving scene. Like, are they more like filter based or just like the mood kind of storytelling that you did you paint in those color key that you in on the trailer?
Yeah. So it's kind of the same process that we would use on Rise of the TMNT. That was my first introduction to doing color scripting for a show. But basically what we would do is you would watch the storyboard and you just try to understand what's happening on a story level. You try to gauge first like the literal local things, like what's the time of day, what's the local colors of the backgrounds, what are the character colors, and then you have to consider the lighting and then the story, the mood, when and where and how the changes take place. So if there's a lighting change to indicate some sort of story element, then you got to be aware of that stuff. And then you also have to think of the color relationships between the story you're telling and the characters and the sets that you've created. So there's a lot to track, right? So we would have like a mood board that had that would have all the characters and maybe all the sets that we'd have. And then we'd have a list of colors and the themes that we want to have them represent, right? So for instance, in Rise, green, we didn't want to use all the time, obviously, because the Ninja Turtles are green. So, and it's a hard color to kind of use with everything. So we saved green for special situations where it was either, at least in the movie, for us, we wanted green to be a safe haven for them. It's like, oh, green means safety, like you're home, right? So if it's green, you're home, you're good. And then if it was Shredder stuff or Krang stuff, it's pink, it's purple, it's crazy. Yeah, like that, it's all purple, it's crazy, it's a little chaotic, but also a little murky. So you could see the color palette shifts to a little more like grungy, like, I don't know if you watch any live action films like crime movies and stuff, it'll push in that direction a little bit. The show's a little more lighthearted, so we burst it more with a little bit of color just to push the comedic moments. But the movie started pushing in a more serious tone, so we started bringing everything down. So we'll use the same process on Transformers. Same thing. We'll consider every single story element that we can. I think the hardest part on Transformers is that the characters are all different colors canonically. And so now you have on the screen maybe like a dozen different colors, which are all really, really hard to create a palette with and like make them work together. And so we end up having to desaturate a lot just to have the lighting help and have like a key light that helps set them in the space better. Otherwise, you just look at the screen and it just looks like Skittles. It's just a rainbow. It's just too much stuff to track. It's hard to look at,
Sorry,
and
John.
so yeah, Skittles. Yeah, like keep that in mind when you're looking at stuff. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Do you have another question?
Sorry, John. Is in your defense? I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, my internet is kind of slow. Could you say that question again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was about to say you got cut out for a little bit. Can you repeat that again?
Oh, just about. Did you guys get the thing about Skittles? It was just, if there's too many things on screen, yeah, that's the big thing. Is just be mindful of how many colors you have on screen and the cast of characters that you have. If you're forced to, like, we're in a situation where we're forced to use certain colors because the brand we work with, the toy company, right? So, so we don't have full control over everything. They make a lot of the choices for us. They like nudge us in specific direction. Like there's so many things from the show that we wanted to do that we couldn't do because it's not brand loyal or it's not.
Oh, dang.
So yeah.
Like comparing the two projects you work on, like Writer Ninja Solo and Chocolate Earthwork, can you describe how background are designed like for 2D animation and 3D animation pipeline? Like how much difference between those two?
Sure. So with the CG pipeline, is at least the same thing between 2D and CG pipeline. You'll always start with the design breakdown, right? So you'll do once the script is done, we'll read the script, we'll go through everything, sets, characters, backgrounds. We'll just kind of highlight things and like, oh, that looks like a set, that looks like a background, that looks like a character. Okay, that might look like an effect or a graphic or something. So we'll think in terms of what's a deliverable asset that we'll need to create at some point. And then sometimes we'll think, there might be an opportunity to create maybe or to cheat something. So we're like, oh, we don't need to build a whole set for that. Let's just do a matte painting or let's just do a card or something, right? So we're thinking of that stuff while we're scanning through the script. And specifically that's for CG is when we're trying to think of all the cheats. But if it's for a 2D show, then we're just considering like, at least for painting, or background design and painting, we're thinking of all the sets. So there's a key shot, right? An establishing shot just to let you know, like just the widest understanding of what the overall space would be. And then you'll do hookups. And those are all the different other angles from the shot. So you'll, do a close up, do a wide, maybe there's a pan or something. And that's all considered, technically after the storyboards have been made, because then we create, it will depend on how the show structures their schedule, because sometimes design comes first and then other times storyboards come first in the schedule. So it entirely depends on who's running the show. For us, we prefer to have some designs set up earlier rather than later so that the board artists have a sandbox to play in, so that they're not just storyboarding from scratch. So they're, it's just their imagination, right? It's just so much harder. So yeah, like the big differences at least is, I would say, yeah, just the deliverable types. With 2D, you're focused on those key aspects of a key, a hookup, and maybe cards or inserts and things like that. But for 3D, for CG, you're thinking in more live action terms of every individual thing. And then you're also thinking of it as like a blueprint to create this thing on a more technical level. So there's like orthographic turnarounds and things that you have to worry about. Like I got to do the top view and the bottom view and the side view and, stuff like that. But for a 2D show, you don't necessarily need to do that. Like look at everything that's on screen right now. It's like, you could probably design off that and maybe guess at what's going on inside or whatever later.
Hmm.
So yeah, just the different type of deliverables. That's the big difference between the pipeline. I would say time wise, I don't know if the schedules are all that different because the teams might be a little bit bigger on either end. It really depends
Mm-hmm.
on the show.
Gotcha. On the background side, does the background designer they have to like design like the whole like, interior, exterior, like in like asymmetric wheel, like front wheel, side wheel, back
Yeah.
wheel, that kind of stuff in the background
Oh,
design?
yeah, definitely. Especially on the CG show. In the 2D shows, not as much, but it's helpful for the board artists, you know?
Hmm.
So it might not be final artwork. The only final artwork that you might need to do is the are the keys and the hookups and the establishing shots, all that stuff. But like
Hmm.
say the orthographic blueprints, that can be pretty
Hmm.
rough and it's just informative for the board artist. But if it's a set that needs to be built in 3D, then yeah, you have to design everything and it has to be pretty specific, especially if it's being delivered overseas to be translated. You can,
Hmm.
if you have an in-house person, you can get away with like um, just doing concepts, right? So, like for
Hmm.
instance, that kitchen that we're looking at right now, like
Yep.
we didn't necessarily need a full thing. Like you could have done just this. If we had someone in-house, we could have just been like, oh yeah, you can design it off this, and then we'll fill in the gaps later. You know,
Hmm.
so it depends how strong your team is,
Hmm.
how strong the artists are, how much time you have, stuff like that. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Gotcha. Back to the gentleman asked one question. Emily H asked, "Are you ever allowed to say those things you wish to happen so that fan can possibly take that and run with it?"
I mean, I mean, I guess I was we're technically until everything airs, then probably not. But once it does, then yeah, you could totally. I mean, for I feel like all the especially with the Rise fans, like they've been making a bunch of stuff on their own. Like once they knew that the show got canceled, they've just been making stuff. And I know like some of the writers have been sharing like Ron and Russ, they've been sharing all this stuff that they've been doing, and people there's a whole project on fans just trying to make it. So it's been pretty cool.
Gotcha. And another question from Robert Baker. As a chronological event student, I'm curious how do you bridge the gap between the original design and package it for a new generation of art style? Which I'm assuming like Spider-Verse art style like really inspire a lot of projects and
Totally,
animation nowadays.
totally, yeah. It's funny because like I've been trying to build a workshop on this, which is just about designing for reboots and and like remakes and stuff. It's basically adaptations, right? Because you have to design if you don't give the fans what they want, they will riot. At the same time, you want to be as creatively fulfilled as possible. And you also want to satisfy the needs of production, and all the stakeholders of that production. So, so you have three different people that you need to satisfy, and that's yourself, the fans, and the studio, essentially. And so you reconcile the old designs because that's in the zeitgeist. Everyone knows it, and so you have to pay homage to it enough to understand to give the audience like something to grab onto or to latch onto, which is another design thing that us as humans we need to do. So if we're trying to create an alien world, it's easier when we try to ground the design of the space with something that we understand. So like a city will like look like a city. What does a city look like to humans, right? Or what does a car look like to humans? But to an alien, it might be completely different. And so even if we design something that's alien, we'll start from a human place because it's just an easier read, right? It's just easier for people to track. it makes for a less interesting visual experience, but it makes it easier to understand and digest. And so if you look at a lot of Jack Kirby stuff, you can look at a lot of the designs, a lot of those designs that he's made, like all the sci-fi stuff, right? Like weaponry and ships and all that stuff. They might look like human things, start out as a human thing, but they'll branch out. So we'll use that same method of take what worked, isolate it down to its most recognizable silhouette, if possible, or whatever other identifiable factors, whether it be color. If you look at the recent Transformers One series and their designs, it's the same thing. Like, how do you push from the G1 designs? But if you push them a little too far, people get mad, right? But at the same time, you have to say, who cares? Because it's my version, or, your, as a group, it's your unique vision. So, at least for Transformers, and I would say maybe for Rise. Rise was a complete departure from, it was a big departure from a lot of the, like, the usual Turtles designs, where they're kind of like the same turtle, just different colors, right? So this was one of the first times we see them as different shapes, different sizes, very, very different personalities, even though they're all jokesters and they all, like to laugh. But the character designs, fundamentally, you can look at them and you can see the silhouette and they're like, oh, they're all the same, or they're not all the same. But if you look at like the 80s Turtles, oh, they're exactly the same turtle, just, different. So yeah, you take what you get and then you throw in new stuff. You boil it down. You think of it like cooking, like you reduce a sauce down to its like most basis thing and you get the most potent, flavor of that thing, of that food or whatever, and then you add in new things and just see what sticks. What is the story? What is it that this story is trying to say specifically about this character? And maybe in, like, say, this version in Rise, Leonardo is usually known as the leader. He's a little more stoic. He's the very dutiful son. And in Rise, he was the jokester, the trickster. He was, he's not that he was lazy, but, kind of. And then he didn't want to be the leader. He didn't want that at all. But that also gave room for him, for character growth, for him to be the leader in the movie, right? So, yeah, you leave room for whatever your version of the story should be, or you want them to be.
Gotcha. And I love the chat. It's like they love tuning into so much right now.
Yeah, of course.
I have another question from the forum. They asked, as a storyboard artist, what do you particularly look for in storyboard, and what do you expect from your team? This can be style, color differentiation, character toning, shading, or scene style, like dialogue, action, etc.
So wait, are you saying that was specifically for board artists?
Yes,
for a story?
That's a storyboard artist, yeah.
Oh, a storyboard artist. Yeah, you'd have to talk to some of the directors, or at least like hound some of those board artists on the show. If you can find them, at least on Transformers, I know there's Josh McKenzie, there's Eric Meister, JJ Conway. They'd have much better tips and advice to give you. But from what I understand, it's just solid storytelling skills. It's helpful to have your own versions of something, or your own like say you have an animatic and you do or like a short film or a short scene or something. It's helpful to have those moments where you can display what your shot composition skills are, your basic storytelling structure, acting. It really depends on what type of filmmaker you want to be. Like, as a board artist, you can take different roles, right? Like, for instance, there's Kevin on Rise and Transformers at the same time. Kevin Molina Ortiz, who's known as like the crazy action guy. So if you ever seen his boards, like, they're just straight up animated scenes. So he doesn't count. Like, he doesn't count as a board artist to us. He's just straight up like, well, almost boards on ones because he's crazy. So don't look at him as like the standard. He's definitely the outlier like don't follow his career because he is like unique in that manner. I would say no one expects you to be like him
Mhm.
or anything like that. But yeah, just consider the type of career that you want, right? It's obvious. It's important to have a general aspect of understanding filmmaking as a whole. So just understanding camera movements, shot composition, all that stuff that we were talking about. But say you
Mhm.
want to be known for character acting, guess what you should put in your portfolio is like a bunch of scenes with really solid character acting. And so that means more subtle acting moments. And then the range of what that means for you. So, drama and comedy and, action, etc. It really is just building out you have to build out the resume for the shows that you want to be working on eventually. So that's what you should put in your portfolio. And that goes across any artist, position.
Mm.
But specifically, it is helpful to have just like boards, like a board sequence. You can enough where you can just flip through it, right? But then also an
Mhm.
animatic. Like an animatic is less important because that kind of falls more into a timing thing. But if you can also pitch at the same time, I don't see why not. But yeah,
Mm.
I would look more into ask those artists, like find them on the internet. They have a few on. I think Nickelodeon has a few storyboard artists and directors that have shared some of their process, and JJ Conway is one of them. Trying to think who else was on Rise. If I can find some, I'll send you guys a link. I'll just send that over.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You can send a link. Emily Hay asked from the chat. Emily asked, "What if you have to fit a character into a scene where it really put their color in a bad spot? If that makes
Right.
sense."
Yeah. So that's you can adjust the lighting. Like if you're in a space where you can just adjust the lighting so that it creates a more beneficial shot, then do that. Like we have this um, we kind of just take it upon ourselves to just make it work for the shot rather than as a whole, kind of, if that makes sense. Because sometimes like it doesn't really matter. You can change the color if you really need to. Just make sure that it's clear, you know, as long as it's clear. Like for us, it's just this making sure that the values are clear so that it doesn't matter that much. If it's a really egregious thing, push the value back so that the silhouette of the foreground character is clear. So you don't have to worry too much about it from a value contrast perspective. And then just desaturate it or push the values, the color saturation and the values to a space where one is louder than the other, if that makes sense. Right. So if
Mm.
the character is a lime green, then make your background like a dark gray. But if it's supposed to be like a yellow, right? Oh, now you have a yellow green vibrating color situation. Like, oh, okay, what do? Push the yellow more to a gray area so that it's less of a lemon and maybe more of like a mustard, like a Dijon mustard, if that makes sense. Push it back, like, and then have a hookup in the next scene so that they can link so that it makes sense logically. So there might be another section within that background that's a little bit less yellow than that other yellow, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Gotcha. Another question from Robert Baker. He asked, "How does the design process factor in the kinetic element of the
Mm.
transformation? Are they considered from initial concept design, or do the modeler animator figure that aspect out?"
Yeah, so at the very least, what we do is provide a transformation code. So Nick Roche, who's the character designer for all our bots and their alt modes, he'll do like a puzzle piece color coding thing to show what piece represents what on the alt mode and the bot mode. So like, oh, the shoulders in this case are the headlights, in the alt node or something like that, or like the head is actually the rear wheel or whatever, stuff like that. And so it'll start there. That's how you at least understand from a blueprint standpoint, like where is everything located and how does it like where is everything physically located, and then where could stuff hide, right? And so we might not on our end think of all that stuff, and then it's up to the animators and the modelers to figure that sort of stuff out. We might have some stuff on the concept, and like the concept artist or viz dev artist might have an idea of how some of that stuff works, but really because the animators, that's part of their space, they'll figure it out. So traditionally that's what they've done. The modelers and animators have worked together to figure out what's the best course of action for some of this stuff to work out. I think the only one we've done that we figured out from the beginning was Nightshade, and the executive producer at the time was the one that concepted them. And they already had thought about like, where does Nightshade's head go? Like, does it go inside of their chest and the twists and but traditionally it's just so much work, and we don't have a lot of time to figure some of that stuff out sometimes. So yeah, kind of gets pushed off to the animators.
Do you have to learn how to draw formation or drawing mecha when you work on this project?
Oh, I definitely had to, at least just to understand more mechanical engineering type stuff, like it was just so important to understand the different types of hinges, the different types of folds, or the way articulation and things. So yeah, I definitely had to do a bunch of research on mecha history throughout like anime and stuff, and so it was pretty fun. Like we got just tons and tons of books at the studio, just rolling through Transformers history. So we looked at a lot of that, looked at a lot of Gundam, Macross, what else? A lot of stuff from Kobayashi. Yeah, just anything you could think of. We just had a book for it, and we were just putting it on a mood board and trying to figure out how they worked. Yeah, the kibble. The kibble was so important. And it's
I know. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the kibble, like Gabriella mentioned, like that's all the stuff, right? Like like Thrash in Earthspark has the fenders that go over his thing, and then he's got the goggles, and there's like these things on his knees that are like forks, and we're like, Nick, I don't know about that, man. Like that's gonna be so hard. So you never see him laying down. You never see him laying down on his face because those things are on his knees, and it's so hard to like deal with. He can't lay flat, and so yeah, it's hard to. You have to consider all that stuff, especially in the transformations. Like, oh my god, there's so many things that you have to deal with. Yeah.
Another question from the forum asks, when designing the Terran, was there a specific theme you were told that each one was supposed to have, or was there a free reign in designing them?
When designing what? Sorry?
The Terran.
The Terrans. Yeah. Let's see. So Angelo Villar, he was the original like art director for the show, and like we've been working with him ever since. He just stepped down to be in more of a visual development role because that's where he was needed. He was too big. Like when he was art directing, he was doing less art, and we were like, no, Angelo's the one that needs to make this stuff. He's the guy. Just because he can churn it out. So when it came to designing the Terrans from the get-go, the original idea was to give them, because they're Earthborn, right? And we knew that the legacy bots were all the G1 inspiration, so they were all boxy. So we wanted the Terrans to just, have more curves in them, have more articulation, like. So they were inspired a little bit more by a specific toy line in Transformers, which was the Furai toy line. Let me see.
Mm.
Actually, there's a hot rod Furai Transformers. I'll link it in the chat right now. But this was the one that kind of sparked the call it, the discussion. That was one of the bigger ones. Um, just more. Just, um, I think there was a lot of Sentai influence as well. Super Sentai stuff, Tokusatsu type characters. Um, there's a lot of influence from Gundam for sure, but also Mega Man, I think, was a big one. Just streamlining some of the things. I think specifically with Twitch. Yeah, specifically Twitch, and I'd say their protoforms. Their protoforms were the most organic of them all, obviously. Water was a big thing. Trying to understand earth and organic elements was a big part of their design elements. And then from there is just trying to figure out each what their personality was like and what brand wanted, you know, like because Hasbro, they want their characters to look a certain way, and then they'll throw us some ideas, and we're like, no, we want to go this way. Let's go this way. So if actually there were some concepts, like some initial concepts that Angelo did, and we were like, man, we wish the show was 2D or something because we could push it a little more, you know. We could play with shapes a little bit more. Like it's great in CG, it looks really cool, but and it's also easier on production because then they can directly make the toys out of the models. But yeah, I think if you look at the initial concepts of them, they're a little more streamlined, just more focused on shape and trying to get the characters to push through those shapes. You know, you've got JB, who's a dinosaur. You've got Hashtag, who started out as a van and now she's a truck. Nightshade was initially they were a gargoyle, I think, and then they got pushed over to an owl. I think before that there was an idea of them being a griffin, something like that. Just a lot, like just a lot of different stuff, different ideas for Nightshade. And then I think with Thrash, he was always supposed to be a motorcycle, and then Twitch was the drone. You know, just trying to figure out how to, I guess, modernize some of those elements. Yes, Angelo. That's Angelo's stuff. Take a look at his work. His work is amazing. A lot of his stuff is actually the stuff I've painted. So if you're looking at the screen, a lot of his stuff is in there. I'm just the color. Yeah.
There's one question from the form asking, my dream is to work on anything related to Transformer. How did you get your work in the Transformer Earthspark project?
I was really lucky because the producers were that were developing Earthspark were working on Rise. So they just asked me, hey, do you want to freelance on this Transformers project? It's like, hell yeah, of course I do. Of course I want to. So unfortunately and fortunately, I would say this is one of those instances where you know, it's about who you know, and like luckily I was already in my career for a while, so there was a trust built there about what I could do. So like a big part of that is just networking. If you want to, I would say, like, if you're starting from scratch and you're an artist and you have no connections whatsoever, do a lot of fan art of that thing, of whatever it is that you're trying to do, and they will look at it and see if you're gonna fit, like if you'll be a fit, because we do it all the time. Like, like we've hired people because they've done fan art of our show, or they've done fan art of stuff that we worked on before, and part of that is because you understand the visual language that we're trying to create. You understand, if you're able to get the style down, then that's great, because from a production standpoint, it means you know the style and how to break it down so that you could do it yourself. The problem that we see is that sometimes artists will only do fan art and then only do fan art and not make original stuff. So it's really important that you still do original work, but if you can also do original versions of characters in, say, your own style, or do original characters in the show style, then at least you have a bit of, you cover a little bit of ground. You're able to copy a style, but then you're also able to implement your own ideas within that style and still make it work. So yeah, if you're starting from scratch, you have zero connections, totally do fan art, be able to break down the style of the show or shows that that you'd love to work on, but transform, imitate and then transform. Like, it's good to copy, but do something that we wouldn't have thought of on our own. You know, it's like, oh, like, it's always interesting when people will do a version of Nightshade. We've seen couple versions of Nightshade that's a little bit more mecha involved. That like has a lot more, I don't know, kind of more Overwatchy. There was like an artist that did it, and we were like, yo, that version of Nightshade would have been dope too, or that version of the Terrans would have been dope too, or we would have watched that version of the show. So like, we're more impressed sometimes when you do your own take. So if you're able to do the style, great. That's a thumbs up. But if you're able to elevate that, do it in your own style, or do your own take that's completely different but still delivers on the story, oh, 2, 3, 4, 5 thumbs up. Like, that's super cool. So yeah, fan art. Yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Fan art, but make it original.
Yeah. Make it original. Gotcha. Just curious, do you think, like, because some people, like, I think one of our class assignment that we do in conceptual illustration class, there's one assignment that where we design one of the popular character in a popular franchise, the kind of thing. Do you think we design is kind of like original? Like, do you think should we put our redesign in our portfolio when we apply to our job?
I think that's totally fine. Like, because the idea is just to show what you're capable of, for one, and what the type of work that you want to make. I think it's important if, like, say you are taking a version of a character, it's all about intent of what the intent of the art that you're trying to make. So if, say, you're doing fan art of a character, then make sure that the art that you're creating of that character is either like you're identifying it as like, hey, I'm doing a turnaround of this character or something, or I'm going to recreate this character in my own style. That's totally fine. As long as it's, stated that it's not from that production, then yeah, that's fine. Like you didn't officially work on that thing, but you are using it as an exercise or something like that to create for your own portfolio. That's totally fine.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. One of the questions from the forum asks, what are the top 3 biggest tips you can give when it comes to being an art director?
Oh shoot. Know your shit. That's one. And what I mean by that is, to know your shit is to understand your role, to understand at the very least, like, the history of that role, like even just a surface knowledge of that role is really helpful. Understand yourself as an artist, and what you're capable of, where your strengths and weaknesses are, because as an art director, you are less working as the artist and more as the artist manager. You are working with a team to help figure out an entire, world, right? And so you need to know your shit. And so that's everything. That covers all bases, right? So you have to know yourself, you have to know the production, you have to know the history of your role, you have to know the roles of everyone else, and what they're capable of, and what they're supposed to do, right? And so know your shit. Know the pipeline, and I think know your team, and those are really broad things, right? Those are really broad tips, but I think those are the most important factors of being an art director, is that, like, you have to know what your role is as an art director, which is mostly you are the bridge between all the other departments visually, and you help create the visual elements of the entire show, um, with the help of all these different people, and you have to deliver that and communicate that with all the different departments. So you will be communicating with the storyboard department, the writers, the producers, the comp team, the CG team, with everybody. And so if you don't understand the pipeline, if you don't know the pipeline, then you won't know who to help and how to help them at any given time. You're screwed. You're worthless. You're worthless. And if you don't know your team, you don't understand the roles that they're supposed to take and what they might be better served at. So say you have a character designer who's really good at robots, but you have a show that's only has humans. Well, what do you do? Maybe that character designer might be better served as maybe a prop designer or something like that, because maybe they're more mechanical thinking, right? So you might have to shift the roles a little bit. Like, hey, could you actually take the prop design role rather than the character design role? So stuff like that. If you know your team, you can cast them properly. You can help them see weaknesses and strengths that they might not see, because your role as the art director isn't just to guide the art, but the making of the art and the coaching of your team to make sure that they're making what they need to, and to get the best work out of them. Because you also have to look after crew morale. Like, people get burnt out. This shit's hard. Like, making cartoons isn't easy. It's a tough gig, and like you do have to have thick skin. You have to work hard. You do have to work hard, and that means like sometimes doing it when you don't feel like doing it. And not to say that you should work in a toxic environment, but knowing that sometimes you don't feel like working, but you have a deadline, and you might not know what to do, but you do have to figure it out. Like, that's your job. That's what you're hired for, is to solve problems. Like, we're a design team, and design is about solving problems. So, as much as we want to be artists and make things whenever we want to or whatever we'd like to, we also have to be professionals and do it on time and to spec, which is sometimes some of the hardest things. So yeah, know your shit, know the pipeline, know your team. I think those are the three biggest things. But if you want a practical tip, I would say if you want to be an art director, work with a small group of people, make things together, like make a short film or do a viz dev book or something, do a fake art book for a project that you'd like to do. Take a live action film or a book or something, and as a team together, create a style guide for it, create an art book for it, be the art director, and cast who you all right, if you're in a group of say 4 or 5 people, one of you and you can take turns if you all want to practice art being an art director. It's okay, one person is going to lead the project, and you're going to cast who's going to be the character artist, who's going to be the prop designer, who's going to be the board artist, who's going to be the painter, etc. And you just take turns and you make stuff. You make those decisions, you create the schedule, you break down the story, you do all this stuff. You do all the stuff that we would do on the show, but you do it in a smaller scale, and you just practice doing that over and over. Do it 100 times. Just do it a lot. Just do it a lot. Your first 10 times is going to suck. So you might as well do a bunch of small versions of it. Right. I think TV is the best art school there ever could be, because you have multiple episodes to do, small projects. Each episode is a small project. They all have characters, they all have sets, they all have props. And so Turtles was my art school. The 2012 Ninja Turtles was my art school, because my art school did not prepare me for the stuff I needed to do every day. I did not understand, they didn't tell me all the deliverable things that I needed to have in my portfolio. I didn't figure it out till I got there, which sucks. So, the best advice I could give you is to learn from doing, actually do the work. And all you really have to do is find the work from an art book and copy it, see the type of work that they make and do your own versions of it. And, if you're going to make a version of like say Back to the Future or something, like make your own version, break down the characters, how many there would be, do costume changes, all right, and then do sets, paint them, stuff like that. Like just do a bunch of them. Like there's this I'm gonna go on a huge tangent. And I know our time's almost up.
Go ahead.
But like if you do want to practice this thing, practice whether it's being an art director or being a visual development artist or whatever, is you just have to keep making a bunch of small projects. And one of the things I learned when I was training in screenwriting was you should have a 6 script cycle, is what they would call it. So in our case, as viz dev artists, have a 6 project cycle. So that means in 2 years, have 6 projects that you can just churn out, that you're focused on, and that you could fill your portfolio with. The goal there is to continuously build portfolio work that that compounds your knowledge from one project to the other. Because like when you're first starting out as an art student, you'll have like a thesis project, and then it's the only thing you've worked on for like 4 years or something like that, for like 2, 3, 4 years or something like that. And when we're looking to hire students, the ones that make it out are the ones that have multiple projects under their belt, that have a variety of things that we can see that you've worked on. We can tell that you've practiced a certain way, or that you understand the pipeline and the types of things that we're looking for. So you might as well just practice making a bunch of them. So if you don't yet, I would say like it's so important to have your own personal projects that you're working on, and even better to have them with friends. Do it as a group, because then you just feed off each other's energy and you just keep making stuff together. And like it's so hard to get work sometimes if you don't have experience, which is the stupidest thing, right? Like there aren't a lot of entry jobs. So the best shot that you can get is to give yourself the experience, just modeling it after the shows and films that you love. So I know that was a lot, but hopefully that helps.
No. This help a lot. Thank you so much for answering that question. Okay, so since our time is running out, one last question from the phone. This last question asking, are you open to communication outside of meeting, either for portfolio review, PT, or outreach for future opportunity and question? What's your preferred way if you can?
Yes, absolutely. So you can email me, just germs.jpeg@gmail.com. Where else? Sure.
Let me put that email up there.
There you go. It's all in there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, feel free to email me if you have questions. I'm also right now, I'm building a community for artists that's focused on crafting your skills, specifically for animation design. So that's still in progress, but let me send you guys the link. So if you're interested in that, you can get it, and I'll let you snoop. It's not finished.
Hell yeah.
But it's based on the newsletter. I've been putting that on hold because I've been building this community, but you can go here. There's nothing on it yet. But the plan is to do, I'm trying to give students and just like young artists everything they need to know that I wish I had in art school that I had to pay for, and I'm just going to give it to you for free. So that's having a creative process, just like you don't have one. This is how I would do it if I needed to start from scratch, which is very simple, which you'll see in the thing. But it's stuff I've talked about in my newsletter before. So there's going to be that. There's going to be a design crew boot camp. So that's just overlaying all the different roles inside of an animation design team, so that like you would know all the roles and responsibilities, what your place is like in the pipeline, what tasks you would be doing from a day-to-day, and the types of stuff that you could be doing to practice that stuff. So essentially, the idea is that these would be an opportunity it's a community for you to hang out in, consider it like your second school campus, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
the problem that I had was not having anybody in the vicinity of like my school that actually worked on something like actually like if you don't have a network of people or artists that are actually working in the industry, it's really hard. So proximity is a big thing, and so I'm hoping to get some coworkers in there, and just a bunch of people that are working on personal projects in that community, and then just sharing their process and going through the courses and things. So yeah, you'll have a creative process thing, design group boot camp. There's a new game plus checklist, which is my version of what everything I would do if I were to start from scratch. So that's a list of 20 different things, the things that I would learn in order to get you going, to get to where I am today. Much of which is already talked about in newsletter and stuff, but yeah, I think that's it. At least that's it so far. So yeah, keep out on that. I'm hoping to launch that officially sometime next month. I'm building it out right now, all the different courses, and it's a lot of work, especially with a full-time job. So that's where all my time has been going outside of like, since I haven't been working on the newsletter. But if you haven't read the newsletter, go ahead and check that out. That's at, I think the link is on that link as well. And you can check out, there's some older newsletters there that might be helpful if you haven't read it yet. But yeah, check it out. Give it a chance.
Yeah, your newsletter, like I say, like I follow your Twitter, I follow your newsletter, and yeah, it helped me and it inspired me a lot, like, to improve and stuff. So
Great.
yeah, and thank you so much for making. I'm looking forward to joining your community.
Awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to working in your community and stuff.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, look forward to see you guys there. Yeah, feel free to reach out whenever. I'm around.
Yeah, and if there's any question that I'm missing out, especially the travel question, I am so sorry, but we have limited time here. But again, thank you so much for joining us here, Jones.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Take care.
I think that should be. Yeah, I think we are good to go. Hey, again, thank you so much for joining us here. I will keep following your Twitter and check out your newsletter and stuff. And yeah, looking forward to see your work. And again, thank you so much for joining us here too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can't wait to see everyone else's work out there. Sure, you guys are making some awesome stuff. Hopefully school's not too crazy right now. All right. Take care, everybody.
We are fighting here. We'll do our best here. Bye, guys. Right. Happy weekend.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.